privacy and the internet. That's the focus of a panel discussion that we're going to have this evening. Very hot topic all over the country, and we're joined by some experts here on the campus of IPFW to help talk about that. This discussion is being sponsored by the American Democracy Project, and I'd like to introduce our expert panelists here. We have Jim Coen of OPN Systems, Todd Eigenschnick of Tech Interactive, and Glenn Morgan of IPFW's Information Technology Services. We have a lot to cover over the next hour, and a lot of this, something that people are very interested in, a lot of technical issues that maybe people don't understand. So we're going to start with the very basics. Todd, let me start with you. Just kind of describe for us what an internet service provider is, or an ISP, to kind of get the ball rolling on a technical side.
In a nutshell, an ISP is an organization or individual that makes a connection from you to the internet. Typically, if it's a dial-up connection, the customer computer will dial
equipment at the ISP, and then they provide the gateway to the internet. Or in the case of something like a broadband connection, whether it's DSL or cable, there'll be a dedicated connection from the customer to the internet service provider, who will then get shunted out the ISP's internet connection. There also will typically do other services, providing email accounts and website hosting and things like that. And if you ask some of our customers, we're mind readers and miracle workers and things like that.
But it is something a lot of people don't really understand. Give us some examples of some internet service providers that people might have heard of.
Earthlink is a nationwide one. Comcast provides broadband locally. Verizon is now providing ADSL and fiber optic service here in the Fort Wayne area.
Now, this topic, we want to talk about privacy issues and the sharing of information, or information that people may not want to be shared. Glenn, let me ask you from a technical standpoint, what kind of information is on our computer that people, bad guys, may want to get at?
Well, basically, I mean, the simplest answer to that is everything you've ever entered can be on the computer. So if you've given it your name, if you've given it your address, your telephone number, it'll be in there somewhere. It's the chore of the software, the program. In most cases, it's either a Macintosh or a operating system or a Windows operating system, to provide tools that will protect you so that that information doesn't go out and be supplied to folks or organizations that don't have a need for it.
Now, how does that information get there, though?
Well, you enter it. As an example, when a computer is usually built for the first time, built in the sense that it's, you go out and buy it at Walmart or Best Buy or wherever you buy a computer, and you turn it on for the first time, and one of the very first questions it asks you is, what is your name? And so if you put your name in there, that computer now has your name. So the next time some program is running, if you go out to the internet and use the classic web browser and go out to Yahoo or CNN or whatever, that site can go in there and look and find out whose computer this is and record that information if it so desires.
Now, you mentioned that any information that you put on the computer at any time could theoretically be there. And a lot of times people think, well, if I delete something or put it in the trash, does that mean it's not really gone?
When you put something in the trash and you get rid of the trash, which is a classic thing in Windows, that file is gone. But what you really don't realize is quite often, especially identifying information, it can be stored away in places that you would never know about. It would take a real technical person to find it and clean it out.
Okay. Jim, let me ask you, what kind of information might a company want to mine from your computer?
Well, a company, most companies have it in their internal policies now, that they own the uses that computer that is provided at your desk can be used for. So they own your email and your email records. It is their property, not your own personal private property. Files that you've created, documents, spreadsheets, things of that nature, are all considered company property if they were done on company equipment on company time.
What's the implication then for employees, that being the case? I mean, I would imagine I want to be a lot more careful about what I put on the computer, what I extract.
Certainly. You normally, in an employee handbook or at some indoctrination session when you start as an employee, are given an opportunity to clearly understand the company's policies regarding the use of the equipment, and it's best to pay good attention to that.
Now, Todd, what information might an ISP, whatever ISP I use to get my internet access, what information might they want about me?
The most common type of information that's collected is stuff to help the ISP do its job. They need to know, IP addresses, dates, times, things so that if you call having a problem and you need support, you can find out what's going on. If you call me with a problem and say I had trouble sending email to so and so at this time, I want enough information to be able to look at the logs to find out who you were sending, what happened throughout the process of that transaction, and be able to solve the problem without having to say, oh, well, why don't you try it again? I'll watch what happens, and we want enough information to do that. So that's, like I said, that's IP addresses and dates and times, senders and recipient addresses of email that you've sent and received, times that you've checked your email, times that you've connected to the internet. If it's a dial-up connection, you connect and you disconnect, things like that. We're typically not concerned about what you do or where you go because it doesn't help.
But is that information collected at some stage? I mean, maybe the ISP is not terribly interested in that, but does that information reside somewhere where someone could retrieve it?
A lot of the information, like the information we need to do our jobs, is logged. All the different system services, the mail server, the dial-up equipment that you connect to, that's all writing out log files with a lot of that relevant info. So that's saved, indefinitely in some cases. Things like the content of the email that you send to somebody would be on our system long enough for it to be sent on to the recipient's mail server, and then it disappears.
Okay. Glenn, let me ask you, in terms of hardware or software that folks might use on their computer at home, firewalls, spyware programs, what level of protection does that really provide versus what we think it provides?
Oh, it provides a lot. The internet has become a place for a lot of people to do a lot of nasty things. It has become a playground for a lot of people. The current generation of hardware and software, hardware being electronics, things like firewalls, provide a capability to block a lot of known, and matter of fact, the vast majority, if you keep your firewall up to date, of entities out there that are trying to do intrusive, they're trying to do nasty things to your computer, or they're trying to hijack your computer as a term that would, so they can use it for other sources later on. I highly recommend for anybody that they keep their computer up to date with the vendor-supplied software maintenance requirements. Microsoft in the last couple of years has become very, very active in this area and quite successful at it. When you mentioned the routers, the firewalls, those devices tend to be more oriented towards organizations. Individuals at home, if the classic residential type device, if configured properly, follow the directions that the vendors provide, does provide the vast majority of protection that you would need. Not to say it's 100% safe, but it definitely protects you quite a bit.
Why isn't it 100% safe?
Well, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to. There's profit out there. That's probably the main reason when you ask why is because there's money to be made by getting at information, and so there's groups out there who are actively working on ways to get around the known security. So it's a continuous race that goes on. We here at the university apply software patches literally on a daily basis to keep up to date with what's going on, and we still get caught occasionally.
I think there's also just a convenience factor. You have increasingly, you see people buying a wireless router at Best Buy to install in their own home because the laptop that they bought came equipped with wireless, and it is a convenience within the home. There are clear instructions on how to secure that wireless network you're adding to your house. And I would guess from what I have seen, 90% of the people don't follow any of those instructions. There were, I believe this last weekend in the paper, an article by Kim Commando was talking about different ways you can secure your home network. And it's fairly simple steps to take. And people can have their access hijacked, if you will, by people bearing them ill will or just wanting to use the access, just by not securing it, by not taking the time to follow the directions.
What about someone who thinks, I'm not doing anything top secret, I'm not transmitting a lot of codes or doing my banking online. What do I care if this is unsecured? I mean, is that a wise or a foolhardy attitude?
Somebody can drive by the house of someone who's not secured a wireless network they set up and could be using your wireless or your internal network to send illegal spam emails, all sorts of things that are going to be tied back to your internet access account.
I was just going to say that as the ISP, to a certain extent, I see an IP address. I know that this particular piece of email came from this IP address. Or if somebody says who is using this IP address at this time, I can look at the logs and say it's associated with this account. I don't know what's behind that.
What kind of warnings as an ISP do you give to users to let them know, hey, this could happen, masquerading as you may have to suffer the consequences? What kind of warning do you put out?
Unfortunately, we always get those kinds of, or the opportunities to give those kind of lectures after the fact. We typically talk to people on the cleanup side of things when something's already happened. It's great that all these consumer electronic devices, you take them out of the box, like your wireless router, you take them out of the box and you plug them in. That's steps 1 through 5, and then steps 6 through 10 are how to secure it. But as soon as somebody says, hey, it works, instructions are out the window.
Well, let me ask you another question as an ISP. How do you keep up with the increasing and the evolution of threats out there? I mean, because it seems like the threats are more and more, they get more sophisticated. How do you keep up as an ISP?
Do a lot of reading, and we talk to a lot of customers. We see some things up front. I mean, we've seen things from virus attacks or whatever before we've read about it, because it's happened. We had a customer get infected, or we're being inundated with bounces from some particular spam that was sent from a hijacked computer. So we get a lot of it in kind of on the job experience.
As people use their computers more and more, and I want to ask all three of you this, are we seeing a tendency to have people put more and more sensitive information on their computer? Whether it's banking records, other personal records, are we seeing a tendency for people to feel more relaxed about using the computer in terms of more sensitive information?
I would agree with that observation. I think the two things that have really, the main thing that's led to it is that the vendors that need these services, the banks, the brokerages, and so forth, that take advantage of that, they have really in the last few years developed quite sophisticated software that does a lot of good things for the people. People really enjoy the services, and they're able to do this through standardized web browser. It doesn't require anything special on your computer. So the plus is that the customer is getting a lot of service, something they didn't get before. They're able to do their banking wherever they want, when they want. The flip side is that they are entering into a relationship so that computer has information on it, and it opens up a new world.
There's another angle. I see two. My answer to that question is yes, for two different reasons. One, people are getting more comfortable with it because of the convenience, and there's all this internet usage going on, and there are so very few people that are getting identities stolen and things like that. So the chances of them being a victim are pretty slim. And then you also have, yes, people are putting more information on their computer because they have to. There are more and more things that are going all electronic, and you got to play the game, or
I think we're seeing generational changes. I have 3 children in their 20s that would never think of picking up a newspaper. Their source of information is through the internet. The things that they're used to doing online, shopping online, traditional marketing and advertising to them through print medium would be a waste. If it isn't on Craigslist,
as a newspaper publisher.
Well, I also now am doing a lot of work in the print marketing side, and there is a huge generational shift that I think is also just making they are not as aware as we would have been in the past of some of the dangers of that because they were brought up with it. So.
Do we have sometimes misconceptions about the danger, or, for example, when you talk about banking, usually if I go to a banking site or if I go to a shopping site, they're telling me, they're hopefully assuring me this is a secure site. We've got this kind of encryption or whatever. Does that limit my exposure to danger? Should I still be, I mean, not paranoid, but should I still be concerned?
Well, that's the principal, emphasis that people think of as getting from my computer to the bank. We want to make sure that somebody in the middle there doesn't grab the information and do something with it.
I also
And-
want to make sure you're talking to your bank.
Exactly, and then also the bank wants to make sure they're talking to you. So it's there's a whole identity issues there. But the main thing is that with the adoption of the standards that are being used now, like you say, the encryptions and so forth, it really is a pretty secure connection. I mean, you really can have a high level of confidence that that data is going to get from your computer to the bank or the brokerage or the store, and it's going to be there safely, getting there safely.
Yeah, that's the key, is getting there safely. What happens once they have the information could be anything. That was my standard lecture when people, years ago, when secure websites were a big, a new thing. People would ask about that, and I'd say, well, yeah, the encryption makes sure that from your web browser to their web server, that nobody's going to get the data. They may print it out on a laser printer and fold it into a paper airplane and throw it across the street to some monkey that's going to fulfill your order or whatever. You have no idea what all these security assures is that you're talking to the organization that you think you're talking to.
Okay.
The
Past
example,
that, you have to trust them.
yeah, the example that hits me is I was working with a large client that had gone to great lengths to work on the security of their own data center for sensitive information, and then had someone walk out of the data center, a clerical person walk out of the data center with a printout of their entire payroll on paper. Now, they had done everything they could to secure the computer systems, but a person walked out with a piece of paper. And in similar fashion, I had a friend the other day who gets a call from his panicked daughter who had just totally lost all the security on her bank account because she replied to an email that was expressing concern about the security and had her connect to their site and answer a few questions so that they could verify and not have her account be lost due to identity theft attempts. And it was a phishing scam, as they call it, and it's the same kind of thing. It's very analogous to it.
What laws are out there, and is the law keeping up in terms of security measures that people who are asking us to do business with them online have to put in place? Are there laws that say you've got to do this to protect data?
There are. I've worked with clients on the e-commerce side, and there are pretty stringent policies in order to be able to use a merchant gateway account. In other words, be able to accept credit card payments over an internet site. You have to comply with an awful lot of provisions to be able to secure that information.
Or at least say that you comply.
Yes, and many of them do audit and test. But there are different levels that you can participate in. But that doesn't really govern what all is being done with the data. And a lot of information that goes beyond the pure identity side of things is being mined for marketing purposes as well. So.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because we want to talk about the privacy issue. Clearly, for companies who are selling products online, any type of product or service, there could be the potential of so much marketing information about me, sites I go to, things that I've bought in the past. How much of that data is collected by an ISP or is on my computer for someone to find?
Huge amounts.
Yeah, that's the quick answer.
Literally, most current analyses of marketing trends are that we are moving away from mass marketing, where a Walmart determined what was on the shelf, basically, and available to the masses. And we're moving into niche marketing or long tail marketing, as it's called, where you really, and the internet is one of the powerful ways to do that, to let a niche product line be very much available to niche consumers who are interested in that product line. Well, to get the match to occur, there's a lot of work that has to go on there. And then you're looking at loyalty reward programs that manufacturers offer, that different kind of retailers will offer you, and they are mining information about your purchasing habits in order to serve you better. And
Or to sell me something.
but, if they're giving
That's serving
you
you
a
better.
coupon for something that they know you purchase regularly
Yeah.
to make sure you stay a valued customer, that's to your benefit
Yeah.
too. But it still is information about your private habits that you may not have wanted to share. Virtually all online sites that are doing e-commerce, and Amazon is the high-end example. Amazon maintains phenomenal amounts of information about purchase trends. People who bought this also bought this, and then they use that information to recommend cross-sell purchases to you.
But if Amazon is a retailer that I trust, don't mind them knowing, obviously they're going to know my past purchases. I don't mind telling them my preferences. What's to stop a third party that I may not necessarily want to know my Amazon shopping habits? What's to stop them from getting that information?
Only you're opting out of that kind of information. Typically, when you're signing up with a company you're doing business with, there are multiple levels of opt-in. Here's the information I have to provide in order to consummate a single purchase. And can we send you regular information about specials? Can we share this information with our partners? That's typically a question that you'll see, and most often it is already checked positively, and you have to opt out. And that's what happens, though, is a lot of people don't realize what those things mean. They're not interested in reading the details at the time they're trying to get that book shipped. So they don't protect themselves the way they could. You can go back and opt out. Same thing exists, though, with every credit card offer you've ever had.
You may not have the opportunity to do that, though. Part of the terms of service to purchase from something or to create an account on some site, part of the terms of service that nobody ever reads may very well say, your information is ours and we're going to do whatever we darn well please with it.
I believe
How many
all they
people
have
actually
to
read
do.
the-
I believe all they have to do is clearly explain to you what their policies are.
Okay.
They don't have to be good policies.
That's exactly it.
And we invite any questions from the audience, if you have questions. I want to ask the three of you in terms of, a little bit about government searches and what kind of information might be available if a government entity asks for something. And Todd, let me start with you on the ISP side. How do ISPs develop policies for how to deal with, if a branch of the government wants something, whether it's on an individual user or a group of users?
Well, the only real legislation that covers that is a Telecommunications Records Act from 1996 that says on contact from a government agency, an organization like an ISP is required to preserve records that they already have for minimum of 90 days. That doesn't mandate what must be tracked. So we may be obligated to keep for 90 days something that isn't of any use. And that's really about it. Now, from our perspective, what's practical is we keep enough the information that I talked about before about enough to do our jobs. We keep that for years. Burn things to CD and put them in a safe. And so we have records going back, 8 or 9 years that nobody's ever going to look at.
But what kind of information might ISPs keep that the government would be interested in?
We've had one particular case that comes to mind about a website that was defaced. You read about this in the newspaper a couple years ago, saying that the website was broken into, and in reality, it was a former employee that logged into the site using a password that had never been changed and deleted a bunch of content. Given the fact that we were hosting the website, it was on one of our machines, we had all the access logs, and I could see at the time that the website maintenance area was logged into, and okay, here's the IP address, and here's exactly what they did, and then it happened to be one of our customers, because it was one of our IP addresses, so I was able to look at the website, or the access logs, who dialed in when. Oh, and there's the username. And I cross-checked that with the phone number that had dialed that account and said, here's your person.
I mean, it's a lot of people would be surprised to know that that kind of back-end detective work can be done. Glenn, let me ask you on an institution side, in terms of the university, does the university develop policies in terms of, if you have a third party that comes in requesting information based on internet usage?
We've never had that. Now, actually, there's been some very recent legal activity in this area, referred to as CALEA, where the question before the courts was do universities, in my case universities, since we offer internet services to a large group of users, a lot of them being resident students, are we then functioning as an ISP? Do we legally then become exposed to the legal requirements as you previously were saying? That's still very much being interpreted right now, but it's actually being evaluated by the courts. Right now, we here at IPFW have limited record keeping in that area. I mean, if we would not be able to do this advanced type of detective work as you describe it as that example. We have some of the capability, but nothing to that advanced. I think more of the challenge comes in when you're dealing with the question of government involvement and government access to data. Comes into the whole area of the data mining that has been, there was some recent, a lot of effort by the Department of Justice to, that's the area that, we've been hearing about, that there's been a lot of activity and a lot of questioning of how much the government should be allowed to ask for.
Any other comments on that? I mean, because that is a key issue that a lot of people worry about. I have a question from the audience.
I'd like to hear from Todd a little more about how ISPs are dealing with the concept of data mining. Obviously, when you were asked for those records, I doubt too many people would disagree with you turning them over. That was involved in an actual criminal investigation. But given the heightened awareness that people have for terrorism and terrorist threats, are you as an ISP more cognizant of the government maybe coming to you and saying, show us the trends of user X in terms of where email is going or which websites are being visited? Is that sort of thing that you have had to deal with yet?
We haven't had to deal with any cases quite like that, what I would call maybe a government fishing expedition. Haven't had any instances of that happening. We have had some things that were kind of similar, and the first thing I said was, that's fine, I'll help you out, but I want to see somebody other than a police officer calling and saying, hey, can I see this information? And in the couple cases that it's happened, it's never actually gone to having to get a court order. Things got resolved a different way. But that's where we would start is, okay, I want to see a court order and I want to know exactly what you're asking for. Because we store and log a huge amount of information about what goes on, but not content that goes back and forth. We don't watch or record websites that people go to or the content of email that they send. We have the capability to do that. If we got a wiretap order for a particular customer, yeah, we can do that. We don't want to.
But you do keep track of, if I sent an email to Vince, you would know I sent an email, but you wouldn't know what was in the email.
If it went through one of our mail servers, if you say one of our customers, if the sender or the recipient is one of our customers, we log, we know the time, we know the size of the message, we know the sender, recipient, and the subject line. We record that mainly for our spam filtering. When people have problems with our spam filter, we can find things based on subject, but that's it.
Is any of this communicated to your subscribers? I mean, do you have a lot of questions or concerns about that and even a website, someone who wants a website hosted on your server? Because this is an issue that we hear a little bit more about, day to day, do you have questions about it?
Nobody ever asks.
Really?
New customers never ask what we're going to do with their information. We're glad to tell them, but nobody ever asks. It's very much like if it's talking about how many people actually read the license agreements for things or the terms of service for some website. How many people here actually read those?
I have another question.
I have a question about Google Google's always in the news because they save everything and the cookie lasts in like 2050 or some year like that. What are the like practical implications of saving all of this information?
Anybody else want a shot at that one?
Yes, that's exactly what I was referring to in terms of there was specifically with Google as it pertains to the federal government was looking to mine that information for research for some investigation the Department of Justice was looking into, and this actually became illegal actions in February, March of this year, and I'm not sure it's really actually been resolved yet. It's still up in the air, I believe. Yeah, that is a huge issue because when we've talked a lot tonight about when you start a business relationship with somebody, there's a contract there effectively, where you are doing a relationship with a bank, a book, Amazon, or something like that, and it's between you and them. And so any information that you're supplying to them is with the hopes that they'll be able to continue to improve the service and give you a better service. That's the idea behind the relationship. The idea that this information that you're entering now will be massed together with 100 million other people and then mined by some third party, in this case the U.S. Department of Justice, it's a scary thought because you never agreed to that. That never happens when you go to my bank. My bank here in Fort Wayne. I'm pretty confident that they're not giving that information away and letting somebody else mine it. The same thing with my information when I go to the local grocery store and buy whatever I buy. I'm pretty confident that information is not going to somebody else.
You shouldn't be.
Yeah, but with the internet, why would
Because that information is going to somebody else. The stuff that you're buying at the grocery is quite often
But with my
going to somebody
identification on it?
It
Well,
depends.
like
If you have a
an
savings
affinity
card,
yeah.
yeah. If you are going through any of the club card kinds of programs, all of your purchases are being tracked, again, to support you as a consumer, to know what products to carry, everything else. But that's part of what you opt in for when you opt into those programs. You mentioned Google. You use a Google search toolbar in your browser. If you do, they are logging information about how your specific browser searched specific sites. It doesn't have information about you as a person necessarily, but it's that machine's browser and what sites it searched over time. Is that information that you really want shared? Because you agreed to that when you agreed to download and use that toolbar. And that's true of any of the other search engine toolbars as well.
I'd be willing to bet that initially when Google started tracking all of this, that they didn't have some of these big plans in mind. And Google is dominated by PhDs in computer science and math. And they were smart enough to know that we're going to record all this because it's going to be useful to somebody at some point.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't have something in mind for it.
Glenn, if I wanted to do an inventory of what information is on my computer, is there a way to do that? I mean, a way that the layman can do that?
Boy, I tell you, I wouldn't be able to point you towards any simple, straightforward tool that gives you a report to that effect.
There are some pieces of software that are meant for assisting IT departments and companies
Right.
to analyze what software is installed on it and give you some general summary info. Those do exist. I could think of Bell Arc Advisor as
Yeah.
an old one. I don't even know if that's still around.
It is, and it's pretty good.
And you were mentioning a couple the other day.
Yeah. But they're largely to tell you what all is installed on your machine that you may have forgotten about or that you maybe never realize you opted for. And some of those could be giving away information.
I can't name any names, but I do remember reading about something not too terribly long ago that was meant for consumers to look through the Windows registry and some of the things like that and say, here's the information that's stored on your machine that might possibly go somewhere. Like when, who was it? Was that you that said when you register Windows and you enter the name and maybe the company name, you might enter the area code that you're in when you're setting up a dial-up internet connection. That kind of information is buried in the registry even if you completely forget about it.
Okay.
And that could be brought up later.
But even if you could track it down that it is in the registry or in other places, should you change it? Should you delete it? Can you change it, delete it? Should you be that worried?
The things that, if it's there to be found, you can change it. Should you change it? your name, the name that you registered your computer with may not be a big secret. If you're really concerned that you want to leave zero traces of anything, you want to, put in a bogus name or no name or whatever.
This is expanding way beyond a desktop personal computer at this point, too.
Yes.
Because any portable PDA, any cell phone also has trackable data about your activities using that device. And in some cases, for example, Google, Yahoo, each of those are now tracking the searches that you do, and you can do mobile searches, you can do searches through SMS texting on your cell phone, and it can still identify and tie that back to the searches that you're doing on your PC. So, are they going to do anything with it? That's a whole different question. And in terms of being scared about, who's looking at the data, I've never been impressed with any governmental effort that I've seen in trying to put together an analysis of this kind of massive amount of data. It would be a very difficult task, and it would take an entity the size of Google to be able to do it, I would think.
Another question?
So when we get rid of a computer, we've upgraded to a new system. It still has some usefulness to it. We want to be charitable and give us. What should we do? Should we pull the hard drive out and tell them, here's the CPU, go buy a hard drive? What should we do as consumers?
It depends on your level of, I won't hesitate to call it paranoia, because it's a very valid concern. I just read an article a month ago about a couple of guys that went out and bought used hard drives to see what kind of information that they could collect, and came up with just an astounding amount of information that they shouldn't have gotten. There are simple programs available to just write zeros across the hard drive. If you do that, that's going to stop pretty much anybody that doesn't have an electron microscope or something like that from getting at the data. If you want to keep the government from getting at whatever's on that hard drive, you need to cut it up into a bunch of small pieces and send them to the four corners of the earth and things like that.
I actually several years back saw a discarded company-level server sitting in a trash bin, and thinking, I might see what I could get off of it. I had to get a few people to help me get it out of the trash bin, and we got the thing running, and it had not been scrubbed, and the company that had ditched it thought they had properly given it back to the vendor as like a trade-in on a new server. And the data that was still on that included every IP address in their network. So anybody who really wanted to sniff out what does their network look like could tell, and could find ways probably to break into their network through that. And it had been just thrown away in a trash bin. So,
are there any, when we talk about the home user, is there a profile of a home user who is more attractive to a criminal?
I don't know any criminals. I don't
I mean, someone who wants to mine specific data, whether it's bank account numbers, social security numbers. I mean, is there any particular profile of a user, maybe based on the volume of use, maybe based on where they live?
Well, the kinds of things where you're going to get that, you're going to have spam coming from overseas or whatever. Maybe it's, I know, the Russian mafia is behind several spamming operations to collect bank account information to send out the phishing kind of emails that Jim mentioned. They don't care who they're hitting. They just need the 1% of people that aren't going to pay enough attention and click on the link and give them their info.
So for them, it's just a matter of volume, sending out enough.
Yeah,
okay.
Return on, yeah. Just need a small return.
What kind of advice would you give people? Some of the phishing emails, the spam, are so ingenious. I mean, what kind of advice do you give people to help them avoid being victims?
Well, just like this kind of thing's been around for a long time. If somebody calls you on the phone and says, "Hey, this is so and so from your bank," whether it's your bank or not, they want to just verify some account info. If you think that there's any real legitimate need for them to have that info, you call back the bank at the number that they have published, the well-known number that you're familiar with using. You don't take them at their word. Same thing with websites. If you get email from somebody purporting to be your bank wanting you to verify account info, go to your bank, ask your bank if that's legit, or go to your bank and see if they have something on their website about that. Just you reinitiating the contact. It's always the initiator always has the advantage there, the spammer, the guy making the phone call. You initiate the contact to try to validate some of that stuff.
Are there concerns, there's so many more places out in the community that are offering wireless access as an amenity to get you to come in. You can get a cup of coffee and use your computer. Any security concerns there on my part as a user using that wireless network?
Well, you've got a couple of possibilities. One, there could be somebody with a wireless sniffer who
And
wants...
what is that?
It's a wireless device, just like a laptop with a wireless card that's had the software twiddled so that it can receive anything, as opposed to just communications meant for it.
Okay.
Normally, the wireless, the packets that are flying across the ether, there's going to be a sender address and a recipient address, and anybody that's not any wireless device that's not that recipient just ignores it.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't take much to twiddle it so that device will receive anything. You can record it and look through for passwords. Maybe you're going to a website, you're logging into some website to buy something, and it's not a secure website. That's a case where the encryption from your browser to their web server actually makes a difference. It would keep somebody from catching that as it's crossing the wire or crossing the air. You also have the possibility that the company, the person, whatever, providing the service isn't legitimate. You may go to a park or a coffee shop and expect that the wireless access that you're using is provided by the coffee shop, say it's a Starbucks. You can probably trust Starbucks, at least to a certain point. But it may be that somebody else has set up their own little wireless access point that becomes more attractive to your equipment than the Starbucks one, and everything then just goes right through them. I mean, that's happened.
How would I
you
know
gotta be
that, though?
concerned.
I mean, how would I know that that's happening as a user?
You won't.
'Cause it seems like it'd be pretty transparent. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just,
that's exactly that. Those kinds of things are extremely transparent. And it would be a case of, if it were going to be a bogus wireless access point in a coffee shop, you can tell there's a wireless thing called the system ID, the SSID, so that when you type it into your computer, this is the Starbucks access point. If you see one that's maybe Starbucks is misspelled or something like that, that's kind of a giveaway. It's a case of you initiating a connection. If you have to make the choice which wireless network to use, you get to make that decision. Some cases you won't have any control over it and you can't tell.
I think, there's the old saying that, you get what you pay for. If you're doing something for free, you're using something that's being provided by somebody else, it behooves you to be a little more, especially if you're going to do something that's important on it.
Yeah.
If you're just out there
Or
getting the
illegal.
latest baseball scores or football scores, then, what's to worry?
Yeah.
But if if you wanted to start doing banking transactions at the Starbucks, you better take a little effort and make sure that you're really dealing with the proper setup.
But what kind of questions should I even ask? If
Well, he was describing, Todd was saying it very well, that you want to verify that the network interface that you're going through is the network interface that it says it is, because somebody can spoof that. And you want to make sure that if you are doing something that is of importance, you do business work or financial or something, or purchase, stores or something, that you are using a secured connection. There's a technology called VPN. I like to minimize the use of weird, nomenclature here. It stands for, private networking, virtual private networking. And what that basically means is the traffic from your computer to wherever you're going, usually like your place of employment, if you're working off-site, it's all encrypted, so it cannot be seen by anybody or understood by anybody. And that's a pretty secure mechanism. If you use that, you really don't have much to worry about.
But in a lot of cases, that's available to an employee of a company who connects to the VPN at the company.
Right,
If you're just a home user, you don't
Yeah.
have anybody's network to connect to. You can be kind of SOL there.
I know none of you are attorneys, but is it illegal for someone to spoof a wireless network?
As far as I know.
I think
So-
it just to represent themselves as somebody else,
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
considered.
But let's say that you rent the office space that's right next to the coffee shop, so you're there legally, and you set up a wireless router right there, and the signal is just as strong as the coffee shop's signal. If they're sitting in the right spot in the building, they're picking up they're
It's not spoofing. You're voluntarily you're using somebody else's service. That's all.
Now, if the system ID, if Starbucks system ID was Starbucks and yours was Starbuck, that's a
Yeah.
gray area that I don't know about. Are you Are you trying to mislead people? Yeah, probably.
That would be a lawyer needs to judge
Yeah.
on that.
But in most cases, wouldn't my laptop just automatically connect to whatever it decided was the best connection?
If it sees equal strength,
Yeah.
it's going to give you choices. So
And it's gonna depend on the software.
Okay.
Yeah, whether it asks or whether it just picks one and goes.
Kind of, and I know you're not a criminal, any of you, but kind of walk me through.
I don't even know criminals.
You don't know any criminals. If someone were to let's take this scenario, and they want to trick you into using their wireless network, and you want to observe or capture data, how would it look to them? I mean, if they're sitting in front of a computer monitor, is it just some crazy numbers, or do they actually look at this in a way that I would understand?
I can give you kind of an analogy because you can use something like a network sniffer. It's a tool we use just in day-to-day operations when you're trying to troubleshoot somebody's problem. The software understands all sorts of different protocols that go across. It understands what it looks like to send an email message. It understands what it looks like when you retrieve an email message, what it looks like when you're web surfing. And the network sniffer can capture packet by packet and show you here's this connection, here's this connection, and it'll just decode the protocol for you and say, in the case of sending emails, say here's the sender, here's the recipient, here's the subject line, here's the content.
So I can show you the content.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you have the access to the raw bits going across the wire or going through the air, you just need software to tell you what it is.
And what's amazing to me in the e-commerce world, I have seen people who are very concerned about putting a credit card into an automated transaction, but think nothing of saying, I'll email it to you. An email is a totally unsecure protocol, and a whole bunch of boxes in between can see what's coming across that transaction. So,
What kind of reasonable precautions can people make without becoming just paranoid? Well, I'm just not going to use my computer at all. Let me start with you, Glenn.
Well, the main thing is that if you use the standard software, the well-known software that's out there, and you keep it up to date, and you follow the directions that are commonly out there, what we've been talking about and what the vendors talk about, you're going to be secure in most cases. And you don't do dumb things like phishing, responding to phishing inquiries. If you just use common sense and you keep your software up to date, you're going to be in pretty decent shape. You don't have to worry.
In the case of attacks from the outside.
Okay.
Now, in the case of the privacy,
that's different,
what's stored on my hard drive, what's going to happen to the hard drive if I give the computer away, or if suppose you're very careful, your machine's completely up to date, and all of that. There's a new virus that comes out that's of course new, so nobody knows what it is. You get infected with it. Suddenly, you've got a program running on your machine that can do whatever it wants with any information on your computer. Even if you've been paranoid about keeping things out, once something does get in, then you've got to be concerned about what information you're storing on your computer or what information you've typed into websites or whatever. There's something that we talk about in security. It's called crunchy on the outside, chewy on the inside, and companies say, "Oh, we've got a firewall, we're secure." That's the crunchy outside. The chewy inside is if something gets in, maybe it's a person bringing in something on a little USB dongle and plugs it in. Once you're in, you're in. So you got to be concerned with no matter what's on your computer and how tight your defenses are. If you do get something on your machine, any information you've entered is fair game. Or any information that you have given to a vendor that in turn gets hacked. You bought something from Amazon. Well, Amazon's probably a bad example. I don't want their lawyers calling me, but you buy something from somebody. They have your credit card number. That was a secure transaction from you to them. Your credit card information is in a database, and then somebody walks into their facility with a USB key that's infected, and suddenly you have a breach of a database, and 25,000 credit card numbers are stolen.
Yeah.
There's nothing you could do to prevent that.
Jim?
You're doomed.
Yeah.
But it's something that happens. We've seen news.
I'm a veteran.
stories of that.
I had a government employee take my data home with him on a laptop, and it got exposed to the world. I think it's a common sense issue. Haven't you had environments where, at certain restaurants, whatever, it was not a problem to give your credit card to the waitress. It goes off and disappears for 15, 20 minutes. You don't know where it's been. Comes back, you sign a little thing, and you don't think anything of it. We're used to that transaction. And yet there are still places you could frequent that you wouldn't feel as comfortable giving your credit card and having it disappear for 15 minutes. And you just got to use common sense cautions. What kind of transactions you're doing in the public environment, the Wi-Fi type environment, common sense restrictions of, can I read steps 6 through 10 of the installation guide and follow those, and maybe ask for some help from the vendor if I don't understand. That's not too difficult. And I think other than that, it's a little bit of paranoia is probably healthy in this case. We are traveling further than our prior generations ever would have thought, and we're leaving a wider trail of data. And we just have to be aware of that.
One issue that I have, and I'd like the three of you to comment on this as well. My kids who use the computer don't necessarily share my level of paranoia. I mean, they're of a generation where they think nothing of using the computer and sending all kinds of information out. In a family situation, do you balance that so that I can get them to inherit some degree of my paranoia in terms of the information that they put out?
Well, I have that problem, definitely. My son, listening right now, probably laughing right now. And number one rule I have in my house is my computer is my computer. And he can't be, because he uses that computer, the perfect example, as you're saying, for a lot of activities. And I'm sure most of them are fine. But the point of it is that I don't have any knowledge of it. I can't control it. I can't keep up to date with what it is, and I don't really want to. That's his business. So we basically have separate computers. It's not that big of an additional expense, and it definitely keeps the tension level in the house down.
That's a great reason to upgrade, too. You get the new one, and then you get the old one.
It works the other way in my house.
I'm going to have that issue in a few years. I have a newborn, so I get to implement my own policies here, and we'll see how it actually works out. That was actually going to be what I was going to say, is the have a separate computer. There's software available. It used to be extremely popular. You don't read a lot about it, but things like Net Nanny that will lock down a certain account on the computer or restrict access or log access to what goes on, and those I think are a good thing.
Yeah, I think like the common sense analogy, you talk about it. There are so many threats out there that we hear about on MySpace and things of that nature. Let's talk about it. You've got kids at a pretty young age able and willing to use those kinds of shared services, and the number of services out there is going to continue to explode, and the gaming environment is probably going to drive a lot of it. And you need to be aware of it, stay tuned into it as a parent. That's part of your role now. This is a different neighborhood that they're playing in, and you have to be watching the neighborhood. And then you talk about it, and you talk about some of the bad things that have happened that you hear about, so that that's not news to them.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for the information. I mean, a lot that I can take home. You have one question from the audience real quick?
Yeah, is it the onus for security on your computer basically then the software, or does the operating system you use have anything to do with it?
Does anybody want to get me started on that one?
It's actually both. I mean, the operating system has definite responsibilities at a systemic level. So access for basic rules. At the application level, things like if you were running Microsoft Word, if you're running an Adobe, Acrobat or something like that, the application has certain levels of responsibilities when it's running, and when it's executing. But no, clearly the operating system, and the predominant ones here are Microsoft, Macintosh, and Linux. They all have a variety of security elements built into them that they're obligated to make sure work and keep up to date and test and so forth.
The actual first answer I was going to give to the previous question about how do you track the kids, my answer was actually going to be don't use Windows. because on a Windows machine, just a plain old user account has to have so much access to the machine to be able to do anything at all, even run a web browser and hit a couple of websites. You have to have so much access that you just can't protect the core. You can't keep the machine. You can't keep the machine itself. You can't verify its integrity. So I'm a big fan of Linux. I don't know too much about Mac, so I won't say anything about them. But on a Unix machine, Linux or some other flavor of Unix, there's the root user that has administrator privileges, and then there's everybody else is a non-privileged account. And you can give them access to do useful things on the machine without giving them access to modify the operating system itself. So my kid's first machine is going to be a Linux box.
I've tried to stay out of the operating system wars, but it's obvious that the install base that Windows has makes it the bigger target. And because it's the bigger target, and I'm running it a lot on different machine environments, it behooves me, as Glenn said, to stay up to speed with the latest patches. That's the best thing you can do, is to try and keep up, I'd say, up to the minute with the patches that are available, because it is a target. It's a huge target, and there's lots of people waiting to crack it, and your best protection is to have the quickest fix out there. So.
All right, I think we're out of time. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for the expert advice. Glenn Morgan of IPFW's Information Technology Services, Todd Eigenschnick of Tech Interactive, and Jim Coen of OPN Systems. I'm Vince Robinson of Inc. Newspaper. We'd like to thank College Access 56 for recording this discussion for us, and we want to thank our sponsor, the American Democracy Project. For the Mike Down Center for Indiana Politics and